I am alive, and it's good to be alive, and it is great to be back to making videos for you guys. We finally got the Plains of Eidolon content update for consoles, and I'm really sorry that I haven't made a video recently, but it was just honestly a massive amount of content to learn. I felt extremely out of place. I have not felt that new to Warframe in a really long time, so I didn't really want to make a video until I actually knew what I was talking about. And there was a lot to learn, but I wanted to start off with something I am familiar with, and that is Warframe. So I figured Gara would be really easy to review and a nice way to warm up for you guys. So just to start off, I'm not a walking, talking Wikipedia. I'm not afraid to let you guys know how I feel about something, so you are going to get a very biased review from me because I think Gara is just absolutely amazing and I love her. That's not to say she's perfect for every task in the game, but she is one of those frames that I just have a ton of fun playing as, and I really enjoy the synergies between her powers. So I will start off by showing you my setup. I will likely have a slightly more fine-tuned setup later on, which I will make another video on, but for now, this is the setup that I have managed to be extremely happy with. I have Rejuvenation, Intensify, Vitality, Steel Fiber, Stretch, Streamline, Rage, Constitution, and Prime Continuity. This is just really an all-around good build that's going to benefit all of her powers, and you're not really going to sacrifice in any individual category. Alright, so I have spawned a bunch of enemies to display her powers. Her first ability is actually surprisingly cool. A lot of Warframes have a really lame first power, but I actually really like Gara's. So essentially, if you cast the power and tap it, you shoot a glass spike from your hand, and this has a surprisingly large amount of range. As you can see here, able to hit enemies from a very good distance, so it doesn't feel very useless, and it also takes whatever mods you have on your melee weapons. You can almost always make this efficient. On top of that, if you hold the ability cast button instead of tapping it, you will instead sweep the blade for a sweeping strike that does slash damage. That's right, so the puncture attack, such as this, does puncture damage, and the sweep attack does slash. This is nice because you can make it useful against multiple different factions, because I remember thinking, man, I really wish that's how it would function. I really wish it did puncture and then slash, and sure enough, that is actually how it functions. It's just beautiful. It's probably one of the most useful base powers that you will get in the game. Alright, and I have turned off Warframe Invincibility so that I can show you her second power, which is fantastic. This not only does damage over time to enemies in its radius, as you can see with the little glass shards flying around me, but this ability negates 90% of the damage that you will take. This gives Gara some nice tankiness, and to top that off, you can cast this ability on allies. You can have more than one glass shield active at a time, meaning you can have it on you and every single ally, and if you want to, you can even cast it on enemies, causing them to take damage over time again, and also making them more vulnerable to your other powers. As you can see here, my A button now does far more damage to them, and it's just really fun. I mainly use this for the damage resistance. It makes you way tankier. This is really refreshing, and I also find it kind of ironic that we finally get a glass frame, and it's not glass in the sense that you're thinking, as in delicate. It's actually very tanky. I would not say she's anything to compare to Valkyrie or Chroma or anything like that, but it's definitely good. It's similar to Mesa's Shatter Shield, only it doesn't reflect damage. This also has a really nice synergy with her ultimate ability, which I will get into later when I actually display it for you guys, but let's talk about her third power. So Gara's third power is one that I don't use very frequently just because I don't need it, but it's nonetheless very cool. You essentially make this carousel of mirrors, and enemies inside of it will be super intently focused on destroying the mirrors instead of you. And for every mirror they damage everyone in the radius, and then when all the mirrors collapse, it does a final damage burst. My particular build doesn't cause this to do very much damage, and I don't find it too helpful. I mainly just use it to distract enemies, because if you cast it near a group of enemies, if enemies are, say, where I'm at, slightly outside the ring, they will make an effort to run into the middle of it, like it pulls them in. It's great if you need a moment or a group of enemies is messing you up or giving your team a hard time, or you see a bombard or something and you can't dispatch them immediately. You just cast the mirrors in their general area and they will run into it like a fool. And last but not least, definitely not least, both a visually stunning power and extremely effective power is Gara's ultimate. You basically cost energy to cast the power, and then once you are casting, it will consistently drain energy over time to grow the size of the barrier, or you can prematurely cast the power again to stop growing the barrier. So it's really nice because you can control how big you want it to be. So if you want to control a nice focused area of defense, or if you just want it to cover an extremely large radius like I have here, my build gives it a nice duration and very good power range, good enough to make it useful on the plains. And as you can see here, any enemies that the wave moves over while it is still expanding get covered in molten glass, causing them to eventually freeze solid and making them 50% more vulnerable to damage. This also stacks with the fact that Gara can blind enemies just for standing in a light source, and you can stack that finisher damage with the 50% damage that they are also going to take for being glass. This is by far one of my new favorite Warframe powers in the game. It's visually beautiful. You can also shoot through it. This is very confusing. You would think you can't, because a lot of guns, your bullets will actually hit. You'll see a visual effect hitting the glass barrier, but you can actually shoot through it. Some would argue that this is overpowered. I think it's a great idea, however, because if you couldn't shoot through it, people would just use it to troll, and the potential there is just really bad for trolling. Also, Frost gets a ceiling to his bubble, which is great against air support. And also it slows enemies consistently inside the bubble, making it more effective against locking down hallways against the infested. Gara not so much, though her expanding wave is still super effective against them, but you're going to have to continuously recast. Whereas with Frost, you can pretty much just cast his bubble against the infested and you're done, because they don't really shoot too many projectiles. Another amazing thing about her ultimate is that if you have your glass armor shards around you, what I like to call them, it's not what the power is actually called, forgive me, but if you look down in the bottom right of the screen, you will see that my power is at about 25 seconds of duration left. When you cast her ultimate, it resets the duration on your glass armor. This is very, very nice because you're not having to waste energy constantly recasting two abilities. This was a wonderful way to give her synergy and make her glass armor last longer without making it spammy or annoying to keep up and maintain. And on top of that, if your allies have your glass armor buff on them and they touch every new barrier that you deploy, once per barrier they can replenish the duration on their glass armor as well. So this is a great way to allow Gara to buff her entire team, crowd control at the same time, and just help everyone stay alive. It's really fun. On top of that, her glass wall will grow down to the lowest point on it, as you can see here, depending on how high up in the air you are, but it does have a limit based on your power range. So no matter how high up in the air I am, my wall will only sink down to a certain level. So as you can see here, if you're really close to the ground, your wall is not going to be very high. So if you want more control or a higher barrier, or you're on really uneven land, so you need a wider wall, you can bullet jump up into the air and cast your power like so. You will get far more coverage on uneven terrain. Great for the plains, but if you're playing on a flat tile set or one with really low dips, you will get this issue here where enemies can run under it. That is where you gain the benefit of being able to control how long you want the barrier to expand. You can cut it off early if you want, and as you can still see here, still not early enough, but deploy some energy real quick. If I cast it here, I can cut it off right about there so that the enemy cannot actually walk up into my bubble, as opposed to if I were to continuously grow it. Actually, I think it'll sink to the lowest point. Yeah, so no, that actually works better. So sometimes you don't always want to bullet jump, but if you want the maximum protection from air support in the plains, you are going to want to bullet jump before you cast this power, and try to make it as small as you can. Like, try not to expand it too large, because this will allow you and your allies to have much more coverage by standing next to the walls. If you have it too wide or expanded, it's not going to provide you as much cover, and depending on the direction of the ship, you're going to have to run from one side of the barrier to the other. And as if this power couldn't get any cooler, you can cast her A button and hit your glass wall to shatter it, dealing damage in an outward radius around the glass. It does not damage enemies inside the radius, only outside the radius. So you basically cast your A button or your first power and it will send glass flying out. And the best part about that is it will do glass damage based off of which first power you use. So if you do the puncture, it'll do puncture damage. And if you do the sweep, it'll explode for slash damage. Again, a great way to add synergy between her powers. Just make her really unique and useful against multiple factions instead of only Grineer. So I'm going to demonstrate for you how exploding the glass barrier works, because it's honestly just freaking beautiful. Let me see if I can get some enemies here outside the radius. Some nice energy from that rage mod, and I will stop expanding it there. So as you can see, got a bunch of chumps sitting outside the wall here thinking, hey, you know, maybe I'll leave them alone, and then boom! Not a whole lot of damage, but it does more damage, I think, based off of how big it is as well. But it is honestly just so much fun to use Gara. She has tankiness, she has crowd control, she has great synergies, and visually, I could not enjoy her design more. I'm really enjoying the new glass textures and look to everything. Also, the sound effects in the game are just super fun. Like when you kill an enemy that's been glassed and you hear that shattering noise, it's super satisfying, especially if I'm playing in a squad with my friends and someone's an Oberon. I'll go ahead and glass like an entire enemy squad, and the Oberon will use his Reckoning to slam them, and when they slam on the ground, they all shatter to glass bits. It's just, honestly, it's beautiful, it sounds amazing, and it's incredibly fun. If you want Gara, you get her pieces by completing bounties in the plains. It's nothing special. You can look at the bounty board in the Plains of Eidolon, and it will tell you what piece you have a chance of getting. So, it's really just up to RNG. Go complete some bounties, and I hope you can get Gara. I hope you all have a kick-ass day and enjoyed this video, and let me know if you're excited to see more Plains content. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out!